The gunshot ripped through the quiet dawn, one crack of sound that split my world in half. By the time I stumbled out of the house, boots, half-laced heart already pounding, I saw the dust rising near the stables, and my champion horse Stardust collapsing into the dirt, blood soaking through the straw we'd laid fresh the night before. Behind the fence, standing like she owned the sunrise, was Karen Whitmore, the queen of the HOA, arms folded smugly across her chest, flanked by a pack of hunters with rifles slung over their shoulders. And right then, I knew she'd done this. My ranch had always been my refuge. Peaceful mornings, the sound of hooves on soft soil, the smell of hay and coffee mixing in the air. That peace was everything to me. But to Karen it was a problem. She'd been at war with me from the day the HOA decided to expand the boundaries. My horses, she said, were a safety hazard. My fences unsightly. She wanted order, symmetry, silence, the kind that comes when everyone bends to her rules. I'd tried to keep the peace. Repaired fences, nodded politely in those ridiculous HOA meetings, swallowed her petty fines. But there's only so much a man can take. Last week, she'd shown up at my gate waving a clipboard demanding an inspection of my barn for community safety. I told her calm but firm that my land wasn't HOA property and she had no business here. She'd stared me down, lips pursed, and hissed, "You'll regret this." The next morning, Stardust was dead. When I reached him, he was still breathing barely. His coat glistened dark with blood, his eyes rolling in panic. I dropped to my knees, shouting for the ranch hands to bring towels, water, anything. But the wound was too deep. He'd been shot clean through the shoulder. I held his head in my lap, whispering his name as his breathing slowed until the last bit of warmth faded from his body. Karen's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Don't look at me like that," she said, her tone sugary and cruel. "They're licensed hunters. Technically, HOA land extends into that pasture. If your horse wandered off, that's on you." One of the hunters, beer belly camo cap, mumbled something about mistaking him for a deer. I wanted to leap the fence and choke him where he stood. Stardust still had ribbons in his mane from the last show, for God's sake. But all I could do was grip the rail and stare, shaking with a kind of fury I'd never felt before. By the time the sheriff arrived, the hunters were gone. Karen played innocent, all wide eyes and fake sympathy. "Such a shame," she said, sighing, like she'd just seen a car accident. "Maybe next time you'll secure your livestock better." That was the moment I made a promise. Quiet, cold, absolute. She thought she could hide behind bylaws and property maps, twist the story until it looked like my fault. But she had no idea what kind of storm she'd just unleashed. We buried Stardust on the ridge overlooking the valley. Neighbors came, hats in hand, faces heavy with pity. Karen came too. Late, of course. Dressed in purple like she was attending a cocktail party, not a funeral. She stood far enough to avoid the dust, close enough to be noticed. And when I laid the wreath over the wooden cross, she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "It's just an animal. People lose pets every day. Maybe we should discuss whether livestock even belongs this close to residential property." The words hung in the air, heavy and venomous. My hands curled into fists, but I said nothing. Not then. Because rage is loud and revenge, I've learned, needs silence. In the weeks that followed, her campaign began. HOA notices flooded my mailbox. Safety violation, noise complaint, unsecured livestock. Each one signed by Karen Whitmore. She was trying to bury me in paperwork, drown me in her rules. At night I'd sit on the porch with a glass of bourbon, staring at the empty paddock, listening to the wind where Stardust used to run. There were moments I almost believed her, that maybe I had failed him somehow, that I should have done more. Grief plays tricks on you like that. It makes you small. It makes you doubt. But then came the envelope. A neighbor, Ruth, the former HOA secretary, slipped it under my door. Inside was a printed email chain Karen had organized, something called a Community Wildlife Initiative, a fake event funded with HOA money, complete with catering invoices and approved hunting zones. My pasture was marked in red. I sat there staring at the map, my hands trembling, the bourbon glass forgotten on the table. That was my land, my horse. And now I had proof she'd planned it. From that night on, I stopped grieving and started building. My lawyer and I combed through every bylaw, every financial statement. We found gaps, lots of them. HOA funds missing, permits filed under fake names. Karen had been using the community like her personal ATM. I set up cameras along the fence line, motion sensors, even a few hidden mics. And then one evening, during an HOA Zoom meeting, she slipped, forgot to mute her mic. "If that fool thinks he's getting a dime for that horse, he's insane," she said, laughing. "It's not my fault he didn't fence it better." I saved the recording, every word crystal clear. I didn't send it to anyone, not yet. Timing, my lawyer said, is everything. So I waited. When the invitation came for the Wildlife Appreciation Dinner, I knew it was my moment. Karen was hosting it at the community hall, funded of course by HOA dues. I showed up quiet, blending in with the crowd, a small recorder tucked in my jacket pocket and a tiny camera hidden in my belt buckle. The evening started with fake smiles and wine, but as the night dragged on, tongues loosened. The hunters bragged about their private weekend, one of them laughing about how easy it was to get access thanks to that HOA lady with the purple jacket. Another joked that my horse would have made a fine trophy. And then Karen, God bless her arrogance, leaned toward a board member and whispered, "Sometimes you have to teach stubborn men their place." The recorder caught it all. A week later, the local news station aired the story. HOA president, accused of orchestrating illegal hunt on private property, champion racehorse killed. The footage played her voice, her laughter, the hunters bragging. The town went wild. Even the sheriff, who'd been cautious before, called me personally. The county prosecutor was opening a case. Karen tried to fight back emails, emergency meetings, public statements about misinformation and slander. She even staged a photo op, handing out wildlife safety pamphlets like some kind of saint. But her eyes gave her away, wide, twitching, desperate. Then came the final showdown. The next HOA meeting was packed. Reporters lined the walls. Cameras flashed. Karen stood at the front, clutching her gavel like it could still command respect. She launched into a speech about unity, about standing strong against lies. But her voice cracked halfway through. The crowd wasn't with her anymore. When it was my turn, I didn't yell. I just stood slow and steady and spoke the truth. I told them about the fake permits, the misuse of funds, the hunters she'd invited. And then I played the recordings. Her laughter filled the hall, followed by the hunters' drunken boasts. The room went still, dead still. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to shout that the audio was fake, that I'd doctored it, but before she could finish, the back doors opened and one of the hunters walked in. The same one who'd confessed to me weeks earlier. He stood in front of everyone, hands shaking, and said, "She told us we had permission. She said the land was hers to use." That was it. The end of her reign. The sheriff stepped forward, calm and deliberate, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Karen Whitmore," he said, "you're under investigation for trespass, misuse of funds, and animal cruelty." The cameras clicked. Karen screamed that it was all lies, that we'd conspired against her, but no one listened. Her loyal followers sat frozen eyes down, ashamed. The crowd didn't cheer, they just watched silent as the woman who'd ruled them with fear was led out the door in her purple dress, her empire collapsing behind her. When the doors closed, I stayed where I was. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just breathed long and slow, feeling the weight lift off my chest. The war was over, at least in the eyes of the town. The courts would handle the rest. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. The same wind that once carried the sound of Stardust's gallop brushed against my face. For the first time since that morning, the morning the gunshot shattered everything, I felt the world turn quiet again. And in that quiet, one truth stood clear. When arrogance dresses itself as authority, it always forgets that power borrowed on fear never lasts.